year in which Khadija died, he had a dream that somebody was carrying something wrapped in a piece of silk, and the man said to him, "This is your wife, so uncover her." And he opened it, and it was Aisha radiallahu anha. And he had this dream 3 times. And you can imagine, because she was very young. The Prophet ﷺ was 50, over 50. Aisha radiallahu anha was very young. He's actually slightly less. He's about 49. Aisha is very young. And he said, if Allah is going to make this happen, He'll make it happen. And then the confirmation came from Khawla, the wife of Uthman ibn Mad'un, who said, "You should marry somebody." And she was helping out in the house. And he said, "Who?" And she said, "Either Aisha, the daughter of Abu Bakr, or Sauda." Now, I think it's important too that you realize the fact that Khawla tells him to marry Aisha is very indicative of the fact that that was not an unusual thing in their culture. Obviously, in this culture, it would be a completely shocking thing. In that culture, and this is something important even in most modern anthropological methodologies, one of the things they teach people in anthropology is to have what they call ipake, or to try to remove one's social frames of reference when one is examining another culture, because it's unfair to superimpose one's own prejudices upon another culture. You have to recognize that each culture has its own traditions and its own way of doing things. And if you try to force upon them your own ideals, your own principles, and your own acceptabilities, then what you end up doing is being unjust towards another tradition, right? And that's really important. Now, for the Muslim, obviously, it's going to be, what does the Sharia say, right? But it's important to recognize that this was a normal thing within their society, and none of the women, nobody was shocked by that. It was just part of their culture. That's really an important thing to remember. And the other thing is that Aisha radiallahu anha, there's some different riwayat, but in Sahih al-Bukhari it says, there's a riwayat that she was 9 or that she was 12. But the Prophet ﷺ actually did not take her into his household until she gave up playing. In other words, that was the sign that she was no longer a child. So he was not with her as a child. And that's really important to note. In other words, she was an adult when the Prophet ﷺ brought her into his household. And one of the things in here mentioned, Aisha realized something had changed her status, because they wouldn't let her play out in the streets, right? She had to play inside the house. But she was still playing. And at the point that she gave up her dolls and became an adult was when she was ready to become a wife. Prior to that, she was not. But the contract, and this is something that Sharia permits. So that's just an important thing to remember. And if you look also in the Oxford Dictionary of the Bible, it says in there that they think that probably Maryam, or Mary, alayha salam, was between 12 and 14. They recognize that was the age of where a woman got married in that culture. So the Christians who say, how is it that the Prophet ﷺ is marrying somebody so young? The truth is that was very normal, both in the Hebraic and Semitic cultures, and in most parts of the world, including China and India and other places. So it's really modern society that has extended the age of marriage. And there's an important book, really, and the only reason I'm emphasizing this, because this is an issue that Orientalists and a lot of non-Muslims will bring up. And this is something that Christians like to point out about Islam. So this is what's called a shubha. So I want to make sure all of you understand why we don't accept it as a doubtful matter. There's an important book by Neil Postman which is called The Disappearance of Childhood. And one of the things that he writes in there is that childhood was in fact an invention of Renaissance Europe. That prior to the Renaissance Europe, children became adults at about the age of 7 or 8. And in fact, in England, in their common law, if a 7 or an 8-year-old stole a horse, they were hung as an adult. And it's in fact, Islam extended the age for military service to 15, which in that time was radical. We know there were children crusades. They had children 9, 10, 11 years old that went on a crusade to the Holy Lands against the Muslims. So the Christians had child soldiers, and the Muslims, 15 was the age in which a child was allowed, which a young man was allowed to be a combatant. So that's important to note. And then the other thing is that the Sharia recognizes the onset of puberty, the least of which is 9 years of age. So if a child has a period before 9, they're still not considered mukallafa. When she has her period, if she's 9 and above, then she's an adult. So 9 is really moving into a type of adulthood in traditional culture. Obviously now if we apply those same standards, a 9-year-old to us is like a child. But a lot of that has to deal with our own socialization. In other words, the expectations we have of them. If you go into, say, villages in Morocco, for instance, responsibilities are given to young people at much earlier ages than they're given